A signed letter of intent marks the beginning of the most volatile phase of a business sale. Take this case study: a Southern California commercial roofing and HVAC contractor with $15 million in annual revenue. A competitive auction produced a letter of intent at a 5.5x multiple and a 90-day escrow period. During these 90 days, the buyer's diligence teams examine every operational detail. They search for any anomaly that might justify a lower purchase price before the final contracts are signed. The final valuation depends on the seller's ability to provide an empirical defense of the business during this high-stakes window. This often leads to a retrade. Buyers leverage late-stage deal fatigue and the seller's sunk costs to extract concessions on price or terms. In this case, month 2 of escrow brought heavy seasonal rain to Southern California, which stopped job site work for the contractor. The pause in operations led to a corresponding slowdown in invoicing and the collection of accounts receivable. The buyer categorized this dip as a structural downtrend, demanding to shift $750,000 from cash at close into a risky earnout. This forces the seller to carry future performance risk. If specific targets are missed, that $750,000 is never paid. Sellers must be prepared to prove that routine escrow anomalies stay within historical norms to prevent these types of valuation discounts. The advisory team responded by moving immediately to the data. They aggregated 60 months of historical revenue data. For a weather-dependent contractor, this creates a distinct undulating wave pattern over time. When overlaid with NOAA climate normals for the same period, the dips in revenue perfectly align with regional rainfall spikes. This data establishes a seasonal band, a shaded channel representing the expected upper and lower limits of monthly revenue variance. The revenue for the disputed month fell directly inside this seasonal band. To confirm the visual finding, the team applied a z-score analysis. A z-score identifies how many standard deviations a specific data point is from its historical mean. This is calculated by dividing the difference between the actual result and the mean by the standard deviation. The mathematical result for the disputed month was 1.1 standard deviations. Statistical models generally treat any data point within 1 to 1.5 standard deviations as normal operational variance. The math showed that the revenue dip was a routine seasonal occurrence, contradicting the buyer's claim of a structural break in the business trend. The team then cross-checked the statistical model against the sell-side quality of earnings report. Verification of the revenue trend requires a parallel analysis of how that revenue converts into cash. This comparison shows historical winter accounts receivable aging versus the aging buckets from the month in question. The buyer argued that the increase in the 30 and 60-day receivables buckets indicated a drop in customer demand. However, the 90-plus day bucket, the final indicator of bad debt, remained completely flat, matching the 5-year historical baseline. An isolated slowdown in early-stage collections without a rise in late-stage debt indicates a temporary timing delay rather than a loss of credit quality. Because the earnings and collection patterns were verified, the buyer's demand for an earnout lacked a financial basis in the actual performance of the business. The team packaged the statistical findings and the QOE data into a formal response memo within 48 hours. Rapid execution prevents the buyer from using deal fatigue as a negotiation tool and keeps the closing timeline on track. The response protocol acknowledged the buyer's concern while presenting the evidence for the normalization of the earnings. The defense also relied on the strategic management of alternative buyers. The team reminded the private equity firm that 2 qualified backup bidders from the auction remained engaged in the process. Data provides the logical counterpoint to a price reduction, while the presence of backup bidders provides a credible alternative for the seller. Following the delivery of the evidence pack and the reminder of competitive interest, the private equity firm evaluated the risk of losing the deal. After reviewing the seasonality math and the AR aging metrics, the buyer withdrew the $750,000 retrade demand. The transaction structure was restored to the original terms agreed upon in the letter of intent. The transaction closed on its original schedule at the full 5.5x multiple, with all consideration paid as cash at close. Overcoming a late-stage price reduction requires a combination of high-speed data delivery and the maintenance of competitive tension. In many transactions, buyers categorize routine seasonal fluctuations as signs of permanent business decline to secure a discount. Protecting a valuation requires assembling empirical evidence long before the diligence period begins. This framework relies on a 5-year seasonality index to mathematically verify revenue variances using z-scores. It also requires a sell-side quality of earnings report to lock in cash conversion metrics before the buyer starts their own analysis. Finally, a structured auction process ensures that backup bidders remain warm, providing leverage if the lead buyer attempts to change the deal terms. Successfully defending a business valuation at the finish line depends entirely on statistical rigor, financial transparency, and strict process discipline.